welcome to the 905 Roundup. My name is Joel McLeod.
I'm Roland Tanner.
And we've got a doozy of an episode for you. We're splitting our episode between provincial election news, scandal, not so scandal, boring Excel spreadsheet analysis, and Hamilton scandal, which is always fun to talk about. First up, if you go to our website 905er.ca, highly suggest bookmark it. It should be the first thing you read every morning. Roland has a great article analyzing the scandal that is actually not a scandal that the NDP tried to get into the news cycle today. That a number, basically in Nepean Carleton, Lisa MacLeod, the Tory candidate and former minister of tourism, has been, caught, outed, revealed that she accepted a allowance from her riding association on top of not only her salary, her six-figure salary as an MPP, but the top of salary of her as a minister as well. The riding association felt that she was hard done by and needed a little bit extra money, and they gave her some, a couple thousand dollars on top of that. Sounds sketchy, but Roland, is it sketchy? Yes or no?
No, but yes, a little bit. I mean, yeah, my own thoughts are evolving on this. I mean, I posted an article on my kind of initial thoughts, and they're somewhat evolving during the day today, which is probably it's not how these things are meant to work. I'm meant to have an idea and not change my mind, but I change my mind all the time. There's nothing illegal. It's fine. It's their money. And part of me thinks and will stand, and this is basically what the article was kind of saying, and I'll kind of stand by it. It's like, yeah, it's. I don't quite understand why she needs the money, but actually, what the hell business is it of ours if they want to waste? Like the alternative to giving the money to her is to wallpaper the riding with leaflets, with basically kind of attack ads. Do you really care that it's used this way? What's subsequently come to light is that this is a bit more widespread than was initially thought. It's not just Lisa MacLeod. That you were saying that there's, we're now looking at maybe 6 MPPs,
eight Tory MPPs.
Okay. Only the Tories do this. Do you know why only the Tories do it? Because only the Tories have the money to do it. What I've realised is. I've been using the Elections Ontario kind of finances website for years. It makes quite interesting reading when you're meant to be doing something else, to look up who's spending what. If you donate over $100 to a political party, your name's in that database. My name's in that database if you want to go and look me up. But it's improved in recent years, and you can go and look at their mapping tool, and it maps which ridings get the most money and which parties in those ridings get the most money. And the difference between the average NDP or Liberal or Green riding association and an awful many conservative riding riding associations not that well off. Some of them are literally swimming in money. Ajax, I don't know what you're doing, but you've got more money than sense. And those guys, I mean, so at the end of when I was involved, at the end of the 4-year electoral cycle, if you could sort of go into the election with say $30,000, something like that, kind of in the bank, and then sort of count on fundraising or whatever for during the election cycle itself of the same or more, that was okay. That was a reason. You certainly would have preferred to have more, but it was a good starting point. You felt that was respectable. Many, Lisa MacLeod's riding association, some of the other riding associations, Mississauga East Street, is it Streetsville or
Mississauga East Cooksville?
These riding associations are raising and spending over $100,000 a year in fundraising, and then sort of using it for advertising and so they can kind of afford it, but yeah, it's. I think it's why does the MPP need it? Is kind of the question.
Well, I like this. Something to keep in the back of your head as you're listening to as the story unfolds. People is that for the Tories, like these riding associations are really run like basically a medium-sized business. Like they are really complex machines geared towards promoting the candidate in question. Now, like Mississauga East Cooksville, I'm looking at their annual statement now. They were clearly working on promoting their MPP, Khalid Rashid. Like they had almost $44,385.95 in advertising. I find that's shocking, mostly because what is that advertising? Because I know for a fact he is a sitting MPP. He has a budget in that office, and there you can advertise. The idea is like by advertising, you're promoting, you're letting your constituent know what it is you're doing and that you're there to help serve them. It is you can spend that through your tax dollars. Every elected official, regardless of party, is able to do that. That's not a scandal. I'm amazed that they said, "Oh, we need to spend that kind of money outside of a campaign period." That's bizarre.
It's a different world to us for what we were used to. I mean, that's the thing. Like you're
told you raise, especially if you're a sitting MPP, you raise that money and you hold on to that like it's your child. Like you do not let it go until the campaign drops, and then it's okay. You can't spend it fast enough. But like he's one of these MPPs who got a $12,000 MPP allowance in 2020, and he's numerous other years, totaling up towards $23,000 in total. And he's an associate minister of digital government, so he's getting another pay increase on top of the $100,000. Now there's one thing to say, okay, yes, technically it's legal and there's nothing wrong, but at the same time you have to wonder like what's going on here. There's something about this that doesn't smell right and just doesn't. I'm not willing to just say, okay, yeah, nothing to see here, move on. Now I brought this up before we record it, and I say this is the reason why. I think it's worth investigating, and two, why the NDP are proving once again they had a good story and they fumbled it because they thought it was like, oh look, corruption. Well, no, you can't prove it, but the question here is you need to tighten up the laws. You need to come in and say, we're going to tighten up the electoral financing laws so this doesn't happen, because you don't know where that $12,000 is coming from ultimately. Like if you go in, I want to preface this. I'm not saying that this is what happened, but this is what could happen. This is a possibility. If you have a candidate or an MPP who is not so level-headed and a number of donors who are not so scrupulous, they can donate money to the riding association, maximum amount. So in this very hypothetical and unproven situation, if I was a consortium of like-minded business people and I want to, in my riding association, I want to buy my MPP. I want them to be in my pocket. What I would do is I get me and my friends, say, let's all get together, take out our checkbooks for $1,000. There's 10 of us. That's $10,000 right there. Okay. You donate to the riding association and you tell the riding association you give that to the MPP as an allowance. There's nothing to say that you go on the record as saying, hey, I've donated to this riding association for $1,000, or I think the limit's now $1,500. I donated to the riding association, and there's nothing to say for the treasurer and the riding association or the riding president to sign the check over to the candidate or to the NPP for, conveniently enough, $10,000. There's nothing to prove that that's what happened there. There's literally there's no transaction there's no letter or note that says that. It's just an unwritten, there's kind of a wink and a nod. And the thing is, like, you look at some of these financial statements, you're talking, there's many, many people on there, like donating $1,000, $1,500 donation limits. It gets to be very murky, and it gets to be very nebulous. Which is what like campaign finance is supposed to be. It's supposed to take out the risk of bribery and the risk of corruption by supposedly making it all transparent.
And I can go on at length about that, because the changes that have happened in campaign finance in recent years, I don't think have made it. I mean, I mentioned in the article Martin Bridge-Cohen, who I have a lot of time for, a great journalist at the Toronto Star, and he kind of he didn't run a one-person campaign, but he did a one-person kind of awareness campaign about corporate donations when they were still allowed. And it was very much his work that kind of rapidly brought about the ban on corporate donations. It's like, oh, fantastic! What a great job there. We've cleaned up the finance. And it's like Martin Reg. What happened when corporate donations stopped is not that corporate donations stopped. What stopped is corporate donations being recorded in the bloody political accounts. If you go through, you will find the names of every prominent developer in Ontario donating at least to the Conservatives, possibly donating to the Conservatives and the Liberals. You will, I could list them now. I mean, I won't, but and there are, and it's like, okay, well, there are limits on how much a developer can donate, because your individual limit's like $1,600 to a riding association. It's like, you can donate to a riding association plus the central party, and there are limits on both. But then if the party and the riding association can transfer between themselves, which they can and they do, you're kind of getting around that limit on what you can donate. Now, if you remember the in and out scandal of about a decade ago, that was a situation during an election where the federal Conservatives were found to have got around electoral law by kind of taking donations from one place and putting them in another place. And, that was a way to say, okay, well, we haven't gone over our limit because it was donated here, but then we're going to kind of send this money out to somewhere else. But that's kind of what's happening all the time there. And I found much more interesting in those accounts for those riding associations was, you're giving $11,000 to Lisa McLeod or whoever. Fine, if you want to spend your money that way, seems whatever. But here's $50,000 spent in the Mississauga riding on buying 40 plates at a leaders fundraiser in 2019. I mean, like, if we'd suggested buying one plate at a leaders fundraiser at my riding association, I would have got told to go take a funny run, because the executive, quite rightly, was very protective of the donations. It's like, don't you dare do that.
You were encouraged to buy a plate yourself and get the tax rate. But you're right, like that. And I imagine what happened. Happened there. Maybe some people were maxed out their donation to the party, and they couldn't buy it. Okay, well, buy it through the riding association. Donate to the riding association. The riding association buys the table or whatever. Which is,
I think that's much more sketchy in a lot of ways. I think it's definitely getting around the law. I mean, and the in and out scandal was about people getting in serious criminal trouble for trying to get around the law. Again, the thing is that it is a grey area, because all the parties, and I suspect this is why the NTP didn't even mention that. If you mention you're buying $1,200 plates at a fundraiser, that immediately, to most people, sounds like, oh my God, these guys are assholes. It's just got that sound of yuck, like people just having fun at parties and spending inordinate amounts of money on a dinner. But the NTP didn't mention that. The reason is that they do the same damn thing. In terms of transfers between riding associations and parties.
Part of the problem is, though, just to run these campaigns are so costly now. There's no move to change the laws to to limit the expenses that campaigns have to have. Like you think about it, every campaign has to rent a bus, and in this province, planes, so you can fly to the far corners of the province, so you can look like you care. You also have to have buses driving you around, and you have to pack up, rent halls. Campaigns are very costly endeavors. There's been no effort to say, let's limit the campaign. I find it's a tricky thing. Because they're so costly, and they need to find ways to make money. At the same time, I just say there's no effort to that transparency. It is hypocritical of the NDP to bring this up. Like, shame on Lisa McLeod. Well, no, because I'm pretty sure you're doing something probably just as sketchy on your ends. And then the Liberals are probably guilty of it just as well, same as the Green Party in some way.
And I'll say this for the elections in Ontario, they're pretty hot on the accounts side of things. It's the process of getting your accounts audited and sent over to Elections Ontario every year. That ain't nothing. If you want to be corrupt, I wouldn't go into politics to do it. Certainly not in writing association accounts.
It is hard. It is incredibly hard to be sketchy that way. It's people think, oh yeah, they're all corrupt. Like you really have to put effort into it. You really do.
But I mean, I do think there are a number of additional interesting points to be taken from this. I don't really think it's great to be giving your MPP payments on top of, particularly when they're already a minister. Ministers are well paid. They may not think so, but it's a good salary, and they get a lot of perks, and they get a car, and they get it looks like crap, and that's basically why the NDP have gone after it. The worst side of it in some ways, or the more educational side of it, it's like compare the NDP is the main challenger in Lisa MacLeod's riding in the PN in Ottawa. They're ahead of, they were ahead of the Liberals at the last election anyway. I mean, they were in many ridings. I mean, that's not both the NDP and the Liberal riding associations in her riding have very little money. The NDP Riding Association one year received total donations from the entire riding of $10 for the year. Plus they got a transfer from the Central Party of $9. It's like, boy, that's a riding association. I've seen some riding associations that are hard up on their luck, but that took the biscuit. And meanwhile, you've got this other riding association, but basically doesn't know what to do with all this money, is finding ways to get rid of it by giving it to the damn MPP.
I would. The question everyone's like, what's it for? My bet is that knowing that. I just suspect that they're just like, no, we're just going to give this money to the MPP. We think they're good and they deserve it. And, because if you think about it, it's like a free market ethos, right? Oh, you do a good job, you get money for it, whatever.
Exactly. That's the mentality. And to be fair to MacLeod, I would say, has a reasonable reputation. I mean, you love her, loathe her, whatever. It doesn't matter. The reputation is, and I mean, I've kind of seen it with my own eyes, she's a hardworking MPP. She's somewhat of a star within the.
Well, of course, she's a MacLeod. It's not my fault that her.
And she's certainly a big fundraiser, as all the ministers are, and they are expected to do a lot of extra work. Ministers kind of come. The job of a minister comes with a price tag of right now. Go and raise an extra however much money for the party. But yeah, it doesn't happen in the other parties, and. I mean, I think that we keep on talking about how like 60% of the population in Ontario, in Canada, in fact, in much of the Western world, are basically progressives, and then you have the conservative parties. But what we maybe need to get our heads around more is that the various progressive parties, apart from splitting the vote amongst themselves, also split the money and aren't getting that much money full stop anyway. Just the money involved at every level of provincial politics on the progressive side is just almost non-existent these days, compared with how what it was in the corporate donation days, whereas the PCs are still raking in the corporate donations in every possible way you can imagine. And many, a good 30% of the riding associations are just swimming in cash.
You know what? I think that's a conversation for another episode. So let's take a break, and we'll be back with Hamilton. All right, and we're back. So while we were focusing on the provincial election, we haven't kept our eyes off, or haven't taken our eyes off more local matters. And of course, if you're in the 905, you are no doubt aware of the Red Hill Parkway and all the joys that little bit of asphalt brings us. But Roll, what's the latest revelation of the inquiry into that mishap of Hamilton City Council?
Yeah, and the inquiry is not specifically into the council. It's into the city, I guess, and what happened with the city, to the extent that there were problems with the surfacing of the Red Hill Valley Parkway. It was known that there were problems with it and that this was causing accidents, and this was not reported, mentioned, passed on to the council appropriately or publicly or whatever. And the latest revelation is that, even before the highway was complete, there were already being questions asked and concerns being raised about the surfacing of the highway. It really is, we were saying the other week how this kind of typifies what happens when you have a kind of culture of secrecy, a lack of accountability at city halls, which we've said is a problem. When people defend that secrecy and say, "Well, hey, this is what the Municipal Act says, and we're allowed to do it,"
right.
This is where you end up. Four people dead, I think, as a result of this surfacing error, and at the same time, we're seeing. Same time, we're seeing it in Hamilton at the moment, kind of a calamity on the roads. And I think to an extent this has been going on for years and years, and maybe it's just coincidence that it's a particular spike at the moment. But I think that maybe Hamiltonians have reached a point where they're some at least are really sort of appreciating the scale of the horror which happens on those damn downtown one-way system.
I mean, that's the downtown system is a mess. As somebody who doesn't live in Hamilton and views it kind of from the outside in, it's a mess. It doesn't. I hate driving in Hamilton. That being said, the scandal of the Red Hill Parkway, I think, is exactly as you said, right? It's that the secret nature, and I think it's just the fact that this report sat on somebody's desk, or it was there. People were aware of this, of the problems of this, and that it cost people's lives because complacency, because of secrecy. I think part of it is, I think we've seen, at least in Hamilton City Council and City Hall, is kind of, how dare you step into our domain? How dare you question us? We know better. Don't dare. And I think it stems from City Council. I'm not saying the City Council, explicitly authorized, a cover up, or I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that the attitude that we've seen from City Council on, how dare you question us? How dare you come into our neck and you ask us questions? Who do you think you are? That resonates and that permeates down into the bureaucracy. If you can see, well, geez, the people who can fire me really don't want to be questioned themselves, then I myself am not going to be questioning or asking questions, or I don't deserve to answer questions. And that attitude just pass on. And yeah, I mean, if people have died over this, and it's so preventable. That's the frustrating part, is that we know. If just somebody said, look at the report and say, oh, geez, okay, well, we'll have to, do it, retar it or re-asphalt it or any number of things that could have been done to prevent it weren't. And now we're still having to redo it at the expense of the city. And, there are people without loved ones in their family because a culture of how dare you question me and my authority. It's childish.
Yeah, it's very dangerous, and I see it so commonly in government to an extent. There's that tendency to say, well, we know best, we know and there's an institutional tendency to defend your patch, your fiefdom, your department against outsiders that develops as well, and it's why I get so annoyed when someone challenges a city on openness, as we've been discussing a lot in recent weeks, and there's this kind of reflexive and almost violent kind of response of, how dare you question us, and it's like, well, because it's people's job.
It's a democracy.
Councillor's job to question. It's a journalist's job to question. And if you don't question, things get hidden. And this somebody made a good point. It's like, well, the only reason we have an inquiry on the Red Hill Valley and we don't have 10 inquiries a year on Main Street is because everybody knows the tarmac, the surface on Main Street is like a road to perdition. It's just a cracked mess. But that's okay because it's only pedestrians that we're killing. The fact was that the surface of the Red Hill Valley wasn't approved by the province. A cracked mess on Main Street is completely approved by everybody. It's a strange world, isn't it? Absolutely, the inquiry is right and proper, and we even before the conclusions are in as to what happened, it seems fairly clear that something was very, very wrong here. Something went very, very far off the rails. But on the other hand, we have a completely tolerable kind of weekly catalogue of death happening in another part of Hamilton, where Councillor Sam Marula, good old Sam, basically doing everything he can to blame the province, to blame drivers, to blame car manufacturers, rather than considering for an instance that maybe the way this road is designed, having a huge channel through your city that's designed for speed, doesn't mix well with people trying to cross it and go about their business. I mean, it's well. I'm beginning to wonder what this will have to. This is going to come back and I think change the tone of the municipal election in Hamilton, because you have this and you also have the Coots Paradise cover up there as well. That the question is, at some point people just have, people will want answers. I can't, the idea of I'll just, sit down, don't bother us, let's go about, it's that I don't think that's going to work this time. I hope it won't. I hope that there's an attitude of enough's enough. We're going to make we're going to hold people to account, and whether or not you're to blame or not, the fact is, if you're an elected official, you can either be on the side of, well, we're going to have to get to the bottom of this, or you can play the obtuse obstructionist card of, it's somebody else's fault, it's not my fault. Let's, it's bad drivers and then why not? And it's like, yeah, but whether or not you're the one with the you're the one that's seat of power at that point. You have to do something. You can't pass it off. And that's what I think people are getting frustrated, is that this council has to just say, we're going to fix it. And they're not. Yeah. I got accused of being, a sort of downtown elitist the other day for tweeting about the number of people being killed on Main Street and on King. And the point was, well, working people don't get to work from home, and they have to drive and blah blah blah. And it's like, all right, this great sort of suggestion that it's all these sort of elitist downtown people who are insisting on walking across streets when the good working people need to drive about in their SUVs and be able to mow people down with impunity. That is the single stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like, whoever tweeted that to you is an idiot. It gave me a good laugh. I mean, it's like, that's the good God. That's the thing, though. Like, it's you shouldn't be going. The idea is to create cities where you don't feel scared to go anywhere. Now you could be saying that, oh, Joel, that's a pipe dream. That's like, no, that should be the goal. As little crime as possible, safe streets, good parks, good public spaces. That should be the goal. Is it doable? I don't know, but it doesn't say. I don't think there's any harm in trying to do it. And it boils right down to it. Everything to do with safe streets is about money. Like everything else in government and in politics, it's very cheap to design. I mean, certainly looks cheap because if you look at those roads in downtown Hamilton, they're falling apart. Yeah. There's no money being spent on them. If you look at streets in many cities in other places around the world, particularly in Europe, you'll see that they've spent a lot of money on narrowing roads and changing the layout, changing the way the traffic moves so that pedestrians and traffic are always kept at a safe distance. I mean, something that occurred to me was that, when growing up, and I hate whenever I say it used to be like this when I was growing up in Britain, but sometimes I just have to. That everywhere, anywhere, particularly anywhere where young people and children and schools are concerned, but every busy crossing or anywhere close to a crossing or a junction will have fences around it, so that, should the unthinkable happen and a car just goes up on a sidewalk, it hits a fence and not a child or an adult. And it's like, it hadn't occurred to me, but like, oh, that doesn't exist here at all. There's nowhere do you ever see the fences that are just everywhere in Britain and in fact in Europe that keep people and cars separate. Now, they're not very pretty, but they've been around since the 60s or maybe even the 50s, and you just don't even see them. It's just part of the street furniture, but of course it costs money. Also the rest of the world, apart from the US and Canada, the rest of the world doesn't do turn right on red either. The idea that you can have a red light and you can drive through it is like insanity to most of the world. So our standards of traffic safety and road design in Canada are really poor on a global scale. And it's like, again, it costs money. I get that, but the rest of the world is paying it, and they're getting away with it, and fewer people are dying. So I think we have to sort of get to grips with this.
It should be, and there's not. I like it. Hamilton has a chance to really fix its traffic problem. Like it's a mess.
If it wants to be the kind of city that it can be, and I think it's going to be, it needs to. Needs to realize that actually designing for people, for pedestrians, for walkers, for people on the street at street level is the best financial decision it can ever make.
It's not something
want downtown Hamilton to have
I just want to say
on foot.
I just want to say, like, it's something that the entire 905 should emulate. Like, it's something we've talked about many, many times, is that this region of the country, dare I say it, of the world, is at a turning point. There, we could either just be the idea of, oh, this is just where we park our cars and put our stuff while we all go into Toronto to go to work. And that works well for this designing of Hamilton. Or we can accept the fact that the times are changing. People are working from home more often. We are crowded and tighter together. We need to change the dynamic of our cities. And we're at a crux where we have the opportunity to change the direction in how we design our cities so that they're more pedestrian, more people-friendly, more socially acceptable, and not just built towards like, well, how do I get across town as fast as possible? That if we like, and it's a big leap, but we need to start, dare I say it, thinking boldly and just saying, what if? Because it is possible. Like, we can build whatever we want. We're not stuck with four lane boulevards ripping across the city. It's possible to say, no, we could really build something that is innovative and dare I say it, unique to Hamilton and to the 905 in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really needs to happen. I mean, it really needs to happen. The whole of North America went down a almost century-long blind alley with how it designed for cars. And, the end result is you can point to any number of cities like Hamilton, like Buffalo. I could go through lists of more towns where the kind of donut development that happened where everybody moved to the suburbs and left the center of the city empty except for those living in extreme poverty. In the US in particular, that those are usually racialized communities, recent immigrants, and leaving. Detroit is another good example. Windsor, the list goes on and on and on. It was a tragic decision to design for cars and for the kind of design the entire country for the suburbs rather than for the cities. And this is the whole problem that 905 has ultimately, is how do we redesign this mistake that was made when we just designed for the car. And yeah, it's going to cost money, but boy, is it going to be worth it, because the places that will exist when that process is complete will just be so much better, so much more dynamic, so much more interesting, so much better and more interesting places to live. It will be worth it.
All right. Well, let's leave it at that for this episode. Thanks very much, everyone, for listening. We'll catch you next week, next Tuesday, where we're going to analyze the Liberal plan and tell you what's good and what's not so good about it. So make sure you listen, subscribe for that one. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns, or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.